And I went in, and I had an entourage from the various agencies with me. And again, he doesn't know what it is. So I start out with UFO 101, and we're talking for a little bit, and all of a sudden he stops and goes, "Well, wait. Who are you guys really?" We went back around the room and tried the agency, so we sort of, said, "Yeah, no, this is really what you." But the point there is, here's the guy who is setting up the Strategic Defense Command, the Strategic Defense of Star Wars. And remember, the rumor mill has it that this was to fight E.T. and stuff like that, who clearly had no idea what we were talking about. And by the time we were done, it was an hour or two later, he goes, "Okay, well, you got my attention, but I can't touch this." And he had a $5 billion budget. It was the biggest budget in all of DOD, which was where we went to, because we were now going to transition to, let's make this serious, official, funded program. And his point was, I can't touch it. He said, if I get caught doing this, he says, "Now look, I'm doing some hairy stuff now, and this is in the straight world technologies that are out there. A lot of debate on whether you use kinetic kill, i.e. hit-to-kill missions, or could we use DE in space, etc." But he said, if I get caught, going to get crucified. And, again, he had the biggest budget. I think I told you the story, but the thing that used to get me in the Pentagon, and it said, I'm going to go find the money. Like there's pots of money.
Yeah.
No, what it means is I'm going to steal it from somebody else's program. And he was the target kind of across the board. But he said, look, if you can tell me what to look for, I can include that in the algorithms. And was willing to go that far, but not to have, kind of officially be involved, which is kind of, this is counterintuitive to all of things that you're hearing today.
Yeah. What kind of stuff were you guys studying at the Advanced Theoretical Physics program?
Well, we were, this was a long time ago. This was our thinking on it was quite different. We were looking at physical things. We were looking at the key incidents that had happened around the world.
What were those incidents?
Oh, we're talking hours of briefings here now. I'll give you probably one of the biggie was the Tehran incident with Girani, where this is a case where they've got a huge UFO that's being seen from Tehran airport. They were launched. This is, by the way, the Shah's still in power, which is kind of key here. So they send up two interceptors. And what's interesting is he goes, what am I looking for? You'll know when you see it. Now, this is a thing that's being seen by the tower in Tehran. They've got radars confirming that there's something up there, so no doubt about it. The guy goes in and he goes, well, got AIM-9 missiles. They're going to shoot it. When he does that, turns off his weapons panel, gets in closer, and all the communications are shut off, but he's back. He's still got control of the plane, brings it, he comes back out, and the communications comes back up. It's interesting, this guy is still with the Shaw's Air Force. I think he's still on, but he made 3 stars. He was one of the ones that survived the transition. Now, there were 2 things that were interesting to me. One I don't know is, did he flip a switch? So we now have target acquisition on this physically sending a signal out that the UFO was picking up on. Or was it, I thought about it, and they turned him off. Now, again, I said I was running the directed energy stuff, right? I know how to turn you off. Don't know how to turn you back on again. And so that was really critical. Also, some things came out and chased him, and some other stuff went down to the desert, and so it was, a major incident. Was technically classified at the time, became unclassified after the Shaw left and that.
What do you mean went down into the desert?
There was something that came out of the big UFO that went down. They don't know, but we do know that people on the ground saw something coming down.
There's been several reports of that, right? There's been several reports since of UFOs going into the ocean without splash.
The main craft is in the sky. This is something that came out of it, something that chased them, and some stuff that went down. But the important thing was that I guess there were some shepherds out there who reported seeing something coming down. No, what you're talking about here is the transmedium things. That's one of the applications. And, it's not just ocean. And remember when Brandon Fugel was here, and we met with him a couple times after that. But there is something in the last season of Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where they're seeing something that comes down, and it's lights, and then gets into the mesa and comes out of the mesa. No, you can't follow it through the mesa, but the kind of assumption is whatever it is was going through the mesa, which means transiting physical material, that's kind of hard, which is a little different from underwater.
Which is interesting because you were studying this early on.
Oh, well, one of the things I point out is that when the OSAP program came out and released their release, everything they said we knew 35 years ago, easy. What they have added to the puzzle is of course official, but it's a new sensor system, so you have more hard data. It's like when you have Fravor and captain's name, but Fravor in particular, where they're capturing it on cameras, and so you have one of my key points is multi-sensor. So you're not saying some crazy guy or, we didn't perceive it that. You have multiple sensors that are catching these things. And one of the things that Dave talked about, looking down, remember, she sees it disappears, it turns up at his control point almost instantaneously. And they see it, and it looks like it's communicating with something underwater. And, oh, dear. I have to watch him. But no, I was just at Seoul, a conference at Stanford University, and Admiral, who's doing, that he's now retired. He was also the head of NOAA. But his interest is in the underwater stuff, because you do pick up things that are moving really fast. Certainly not biologics, but that's as they point out, most of the ocean has not been mapped. There's an awful lot of space. But that was actually the cases that I think I heard of. They were similar, and the reason they were classified may still be, I don't know, but was where they were. But this stuff was being reported 40, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the other incidents that you studied? Oh,
I think the biggest, in my view, was what's known as Bentwaters or Rendlesham Forest. Chuck Holt is probably the best guy on this. Chuck was the deputy base commander at Bentwaters, and this is volumes written on the particular case, but I found it very significant because of the number of people involved. And it's one of the few cases, most of the time you study these things and the credibility, this is one that gets stronger over time, and more people coming out. And now they found fairly recently radar confirmation that there was something over the base. And it was not a singular event. What I learned from Chuck later, this had been going on for a long time. And it turns out this was almost like the ranch kind of thing, where the events had been reported for decades.
It just keeps happening. It just keeps happening.
Of various kinds. I mean, some of them were lights in the sky and strange phenomena being reported. But the particular one here was, and it started in late December 1980. By the way, you should come back to Cash Landrum, because it's interesting that happened at the same night. But so this one's out there, and they see what they think is a plane has crashed or something off the base. And so Roger Penniston and John Burroughs and another one go out there. And, they have to, this gets very sensitive now, because you're leaving a military base and have to leave. These are air policemen. Leave the weapons behind, because the SOFA agreement as to what you can and can't do and where you can do it. So they go out, and it's interesting because years later I called Jim Penniston, who was a staff sergeant at the time, and so I want to talk to you about the UFO. He says, "Oh, you mean the one I touched?" And actually walked up on it. There's a heavy thing sitting on the ground. It's in, like I said, late December. And what was interesting is there's actually indentations on the ground, and I've seen the plaster casts from this. So you had physical evidence of this thing sitting on the ground, must have had weight. He talks about certain symbols that he saw and wrote those up. So the first incident happens. A few days later, they're having a end of the year party or Christmas party, and Chuck is there, and they're about to give out the awards for being nice people and that. And he says the provost marshal comes in. He says they're back. He says, "Who's back?" He says, "The UFOs are back." And Chuck tells us both, but it was, "I'll take care of this." One of the worst decisions he probably ever made, thinking, I'm going to go out and we're going to resolve this. So he gets, I forgot who the sergeant was who was with him, who gets radiac meters and things to check on radiation and whatnot, and he goes out. They go outside the base, and using a radiac. Sure enough, there's stuff above background noise. And here's this thing hovering out in the trees ahead of them, and it starts manipulating, staying away from them, then splits into 5 pieces and zips off. And as I recall, 2 of them come over and shoot a beam at his feet. And so he goes back. So he's recording this at the time of what's happening. And that eventually got released. And then the conventional wisdom was, because there's a periodicity to these lights that are appearing. And he says, it's got to be a lighthouse at some distance away. And they went back and looked at it and said, you can't see the lighthouse from there. But we have over 60 witnesses now. Are you familiar with the PRP, Personnel Reliability Program?
No.
Okay, well, again, the other aspect of what was not known at the time was that Bentwaters was the forward-most nuclear storage area in Europe. And supposedly this thing came over and it was shooting beams down into the storage area. And I had met with Chuck. I've now moved to Los Alamos, and years later I heard about this, and I knew where he was as a civilian. I had set up lunch, like to meet with him. And what he says was, because nothing, so there was no debriefing or anything of that nature at the time, And he says, "Oh, I'm finally going to get debriefed because I'm coming from Los Alamos, and no, I'm there to ask questions and whatnot." He is convinced that a lot of his people were screwed with. After this, their careers in general did not fare well. Burroughs has had significant medical issues, and some of this does get into classified. I know they had trouble even getting his medical records. I think Kit got involved in even obtaining his medical records because he was trying to address heart problems that he had. But again, it's the amount of witnesses, the physical witness, recurring event, pretty damn significant. But as I mentioned, the Cash Landrum happens at the same time. The Cash Landrum's a case where UFO was seen, importantly, it's fairly close to Houston, a remote area. Two women and a boy are driving down the road, and here's this UFO that's kind of shutting in, I suppose he's seeing flame out or something. And there are, depends on the count, 22, 23 helicopters that are supposedly circulating around it. Now, this is, I think it's the 27th of December. And if you know anything about what goes on between Christmas and New Year's, basically nothing. So anyway, what happens is they stop the car and they get out. Betty Cash runs around in front of it. Landrum opens the door, stands behind the little boy. Cody gets out, looks, he gets scared, runs around and jumps back. He's now grown and they've talked to these issues. So the point was that they were exposed to some kind of radiation. And Betty Cash, who got out in front, in fact, later died from leukemia, but she has whole body radiation. Landrum, not so much, but she's standing with the car door, so it's partially blocking it. And Cody, the little boy who runs around and jumps back, so he's got minimal. So everything physically fits. Fast forward a few years, they sue the government, specifically the Air Force, over this event because of danger. And the supposition here is this was some kind of test vehicle that was out there in the radiant, and particularly because of the helicopters. What happens is that the Air Force looks at it and says, ain't ours. And besides, those are Army helicopters. And so it comes to Army IG. Well, remember, I used to work there. So the guy who gets the case comes to me and a couple other people who were radiation experts. And he went out and did a fantastic study, very extensive. And what we know, the only military helicopter was a Huey who had been in the area earlier in the day but had landed back at Fort Hood before this event occurred. And they went so far as to hit the Marines, and the Marines were off of Florida. They were not in the area where it might have had Chinooks or something. And the point is, they weren't ours. And, even after extensive search, you could not account for the helicopter, the radiation, the UFO, but absolutely certain that it happened. And their description and injuries are totally consistent with the story that they told. There's no doubt the event happened.
What do you think? What do you make of this?
I have no idea. Like I say, I was one of the people that George Saran, who was the IG who got the case, talked to him. And to this day, I've talked to him a couple of years back when this came up again, and just said, this is the problem. And again, my UFO book, the first line that I wrote is UFOs are real. The last paragraph is, whatever this is, it is more complex than we can imagine.
Are there any other incidents that you feel were extremely significant?
Oh, hundreds.
Can you go into some more?
Faded Giant case. This is one where, well, first of all, the northern tier sightings were ones that were going on across the northern United States. These were all the missile bases. Sidelight. One of the things that was interesting, I think it's in Blue Book, but it's one of the reports from a young patrolman, air patrolman who was out guarding the base, and he reports the missile. The caveat was the only reason he reported this is because he's new and hasn't seen them before. The point is everybody is seeing this stuff. Now this particular case, Bob Salas was he was the missile control officer, but air patrolmen on top are seeing UFOs along. And they call down and says, what do we do? And all of a sudden he goes, I haven't got time to talk about that. Missiles are going offline. And 7 to 8 missiles go offline. And so he calls back to NORAD headquarters and goes, our missile, and say, we haven't got time to talk to you. This is, I think it was Echo or November. I get the sites mixed up. He says, the other site is already down 10 for 10. Now, we are talking here, I mean, if you know the nuclear triad, this is, you want significant when you, now, the MPDI is 2 missiles. Well, basically, you get one every 6 months in the entire wing. And here you've got, 17, 18 down simultaneously. And, there's no doubt about it. Now, I do know what happened because I talked to most of the people involved, that they went, this was a WTF, right? Huge. And not like it went unnoticed, and they went through and looked at every possibility and could not come up with they did tests on, it was EMP, it was the short, and nobody has ever come up with a solution. I might mention, it's not just us. This is one where you have the Soviet. This is where George Knapp gets involved. So he went over, he'd been in the Soviet Union and Russia later. In Ukraine, there's another one where their case is a little different. The UFO hovers up here for hours with hundreds of witnesses. They don't shut the missiles down. They start spinning them up. So, and this guy's, the launch officer is about to start World War III, and I can't stop it. And again, this thing has been hovering there for hours, plenty of witnesses, and then all of a sudden it shuts off. And now the difference that I think is critical here is that, we trusted our launch control officers. Soviets did not. And so the Soviet system was centralized. It had to have been, in order for that to happen, it had to run from Moscow. And obviously it didn't. Ours was central, so it shut down. Theirs and runs up. And this is one he had gone, I think it was Russia by the time he had brought those files out. But I don't know how much more significant than you get than screwing with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, no kidding. What have you had to have thought about where did these come from? Are they coming from? Where are they coming from?
You want to venture out there?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the wrong question.
What is the right question?
Well, I come down against the ET hypothesis. That's the extra hypothesis. Little gray guys from Zeta Reticuli coming here. Words that we're using now have to do more with ultra-terrestrial. And my point would be that there are a number of possibilities, interdimensional, temporal distortion, i.e. time travelers and things like that. Now, this gets into, if you haven't been involved in this, sounding really crazy.
That's okay.
But as you look at these things, you go, one of my points is that there are reports of incidents between humans and sentient non-humans throughout the entirety of human history and in all cultures. My pet phrase is, if they fly in little tin cans, that's kind of a new wrinkle to a very old story. When you say this, if you get into Skinwalker Ranch, the beings of some kind moving back and forth through dimension, if you're using an interdimensional construct, the where overcomes all the issues of how do you get there from here and whatnot. Though I do think you can probably get superluminal. I know a lot of folks will disagree with that, but it gets away from the whole problem of, like I said, little gray guys from Zeta Reticuli. You're back to your fundamental issue of consciousness.
What about it? Where are you going?
Well, if consciousness creates matter and that this is some interaction on consciousness that, beyond our understanding at this point, certainly.
So you think...
But remember, as I said, not just in, the sensing, you get into ghosts, into spiritual beings, into kind of a host of things that have been reported for millennia.